Will your property appraise, and should you care? That's today's episode. Let's dive into it. Here we are at our very first rental property. Hey everyone, I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
Longtime real estate investors, and this is the show where we help you build financial intelligence, make a change in your life if you want to escape the rat race and actually get your finances in order and start to build actual wealth, then this is the channel for you. Now, this is it. So we want to have a frank discussion today. Is Frank here, by the way?
No.
Get Frank in here. We want to have a frank discussion about the appraisal process. And will your property appraise? It's a question that we get an awful lot.
Yeah.
And people, if they're off on their own, doing their own thing, working on buying their first property, they're worried about whether or not this property will appraise. Why?
For a couple of reasons, right? A lot of times we teach you about unconventional financing. You want to get into a property, you found a great deal. Maybe you use fund and grow. Maybe you use plastic with some credit card balance that you haven't been using before, right? There are all kinds of ways that we've taught you to think about getting into a property that are sort of short-term measures so that, oh my gosh, you own a property, now you have rent roll, which is wonderful, right? But then now most of these people are thinking, okay, but I have to get into a long-term solution, some kind of longer-term mortgage that at a better interest rate, right? It's not
right,
because maybe
you got into it at like you're using hard money or something. You got in at like 12% interest, and you want to get into like a 30-year mortgage that's going to last for a long time at like a 3 or like a 5% interest, right?
Right. And so, okay, let's go through an example like this. Let's say you found an awesome off-market property for $50,000 and it's cash flowing, but you had sort of an unfavorable terms like 12% with a hard money lender. Okay. And so you need to get out of that, and you have 6 to 12 months in order to do that. So then you start to shop around for lenders. We've talked many times on this channel about how to do this. We have giveaways, lender comparison worksheets. We can put that below. So now you found a lender that you want to work with, and they'll say, awesome, now we have to make sure the property appraises. So this is something you should have already expected, because when you go through the loan process, you're going to have to get an appraisal. Right.
So what's the problem with the appraisal process? So let's be frank about this process. There was an article, I think about 1.5 years ago to 2 years ago, that I like to reference. I think it was in the Atlantic.
Let's be positive, though.
Okay. I am being positive.
Okay. I know where he's going. I'm
going to be positive about it.
I can see the run up, but okay.
But ask any long-term real estate investor or realtor, battling up against appraisals is a huge problem right now, especially in the past 10, 11 years since we've gone through the housing crash and collapse. So this article a few years ago called "Parents Don't Let Their Kids Grow Up to Be Appraisers." And the premise of the article is that appraisers are being replaced by computers. And no young people are going into the appraisal field. No one's like, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be an appraiser. That's the point of the piece. That a lot of large hedge funds, a lot of large real estate investment companies are just using electronic algorithms to get a general sense of value on properties that they purchase.
So the appraisal system is for the lender to have some kind of expert to say this property is worth X, right? So ideally, if you bought this property and it's worth $50,000 to you because you bought that, and the lender comes in and says, well, we think it's worth 40, right? Because the appraisers almost always lowball you. You have to kind of expect that. So then you can't get $50,000 back into cash. The lender doesn't want to pay $50,000. The lender's not going to finance more than it thinks it's worth. The lender usually only finances about 80% of what it's worth.
Or 70%. Right.
So now the lender is saying we will only finance 80% of 40,000. So now you're stuck with the balance of 15,000 or whatever.
So the bottom line is you need to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? Because what you're not buying something, you're not playing the appreciation game here on this property. If you're buying a $50, $60, $70, $80,000 property, and that appraiser comes in and is $5,000 less than you thought it was, or $10,000 less than you thought it was, remember that appraisers right now, because they got so pinched because of the housing collapse, remember these appraisals back then, right? You'd buy a house for $200,000, and then 3 months later, people were selling it for $230,000, and appraisers got blamed big time for what happened back then, for these overinflated appraisals. So now they have gone the opposite route.
Yeah.
They want to go well below what they think it's worth. They're not even pulling a lot of renovated comparables in neighborhoods. They're using like foreclosed properties or ones that still need work as comparables. We've gone through a number of appraisals where we've seen this. We've seen their comparables that they present, and they're using houses that haven't even been renovated as comparable properties. Now, that's not me to like crap on appraisers here, but the bottom line is they're being extra conservative, extra cautious, and they're going the opposite direction. So the bottom line is you need to be okay with having to come to the table with that remaining balance because it's a cash flowing property.
Now, a lot of times, the reason why I'm okay with this, so we had one recently in a very similar situation that appraised for slightly less than I had bought it for, but I knew the return on investment on the cash I paid was still good. I knew that the lender was going to pay about $10,000 less, so I still would have to pay $10,000 to the first lender, right, the unfavorable loan, in order to get into this other loan. But I knew that if I wanted this property, I was never going to get the new lender to finance the purchase, just because they don't finance LLCs. They don't really do investment loans all that much. But if you own it, different story. A lender is going to say, oh, you own this already and you just want to refinance it? Absolutely, I want to make money on that. But am I going to let you purchase it? Much less likely, right? So I took unfavorable bank product A, got rid of it for favorable bank product B because interest rates are pretty good right now. And I knew that that extra $10,000 was just my skin in the game. So now I've got equity in this property and a favorable loan attached to it and cash flow. I'm good with that, right? If I had gone to Bank B originally and say, I want to buy it, I'll put $10,000 down and you do the remainder, they wouldn't have done it, right? This was sort of my interim step. Now, if you're fighting appraisals, though, the problem is you can say, well, I don't agree with your appraisal, so I push back. A lot of times you can send them comps you think that they did not consider. Sometimes. And
they throw them right in the trash, by the way.
Yeah. Sometimes that works. Sometimes that doesn't. In fact, I've seen it not work more often than I've seen it worked. Or you can say, well, okay, forget this bank. I'm going to go with another bank. The problem is you pay for these appraisals and they cost around $500 each. So that's an expensive game to play.
Right. So again, you have to be okay with your purchase. I was talking to an investor today about this very thing. And he said, look, if you do what we do, we are entrepreneurs. Appraisers are not entrepreneurs.
No,
they're not.
They're not.
So you as an entrepreneur are buying a property that is going to be held by you probably for the rest of your life. You're going to hand it down to your family. It's going to produce cash flow at a return on investment that you are very comfortable with. So if it's producing 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% return, are you okay with the fact that an appraiser came in and gave you an unfavorable appraisal?
Right.
You bought it for 60, the guy comes in and appraises it for 45. Are you okay with that? And you also have to consider the fact that a lot of these appraisals are not looking at renovated properties. And so you have to remember that you're not playing the appreciation game here. But if you fully don't have the money to play this game, and you really want to try to create like an infinite return for yourself and pull all of your money back out eventually with appreciation and getting all of your money back out, then you should probably be paying more for a property. You're going to want to go into that retail comp area. Those are the neighborhoods where there's probably not a lot of rentals, much more of a retail play. You're going to spend more money on that property. You're going to probably be well into the mid 150s or up to 200,000 range, where you're going to have more comparable retail sales that you're probably likely to get a more favorable appraisal.
Right.
But then again, your ROI is going to be much lower. So you have to be comfortable with this give and take.
So when people come to us and they say, oh, I like this property, I like the return on investment, I'm worried it won't appraise so that I can get my money back or, pay whatever stopgap measure I have to get into it. We want to say to you, it probably won't. And so the difference between what it appraises for and what you bought it for is your skin in the game. It's your responsibility, just like it would be when you buy your primary house. The lender's not going to say, great, I finance 100%. Those days are over. Hopefully they never come back again. So that's your investment. That's your part. So hopefully it adds up to between 15 and 25%. And then you're like, great, now I got a good product. I'm cash flowing, I'm rocking and rolling, right?
Right. And you also want to have a smart exit strategy. I mean, let's be honest, if you suddenly need to get out of these properties, are you comfortable being able to then turn around and maybe put it out with a realtor, or maybe turn it and sell it to another investor that will see the value in this property? Because look, there is a dearth right now, a lack of properties available in the affordable housing space. It's the number one investment strategy, I believe, right now. And so there's such a lack of properties in that price range. Are you comfortable getting out of that property quickly, selling it off to another investor if for some reason, God forbid, some tragedy befell your family that you needed to get out of it? What is your exit strategy? You want to make sure you know where the exits are in the movie theater and keeping an eye out for those things as you plan your investment strategy.
Now, I want to point out, I'm sensitive about how this comes off, but there is animosity between this is a very generalized thing to say, but I'm going to say it. Between appraisers and investors. Like, I don't think that they're simpatico.
No.
Now, remember, up until actually just 2018, it used to be that appraisers had to have a college degree or some form of college completed. That's not the case anymore. Now it's simply an apprenticeship and a license. They have to take a test and they have to have so many hours of an apprenticeship. And they go through all of this and they make between $25,000 and $60,000 on average. That's like the higher end. Now maybe some in like inflated markets like New York City or the San Francisco Bay Area is a little bit more. But they're not making a ton in order to say like really become investors themselves. They understand that as an investor, they're messing with someone else's cash, right? They're not really motivated to give your house the benefit of the doubt. Was that sensitive? I feel like I'm saying like they don't like you. I don't mean that. I just mean like they're not by and large on your side.
No. And look, again, I come back to what happened during the collapse and the crash is that everyone blamed them because they were just like working with realtors. They were like, oh, you want it to be $240,000? I'll kind of look the other way. And then this house that again was $200,000 4 months ago is now $240,000. So money. It was just like people didn't have to get didn't have to have a job to get a loan. So it became much more stringent after the crash. But at the end of the day, computers are replacing appraisers. I mean, here's a perfect example. We had a property. We bought it, I think, in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Okay, in this area that I knew. I have a couple of other properties in this neighborhood that are worth about. I know their worth is about 90. I'm not ever going to sell them, but that's what they're worth. We put about 10,000 into this property. We even spoke to the appraiser who was showing up to the property. And she said, oh, what'd you do to the property? I'm like, we did new windows, we put in new mechanicals. I think we updated the cabinets. We did this, whatever it was, but it was a good amount of stuff. And I said, yeah, I think we bought it, 63 or 60,000 or something like that it was a foreclosure or short sale or something. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, great. And then the appraisal came in below what we bought it for.
I don't know which property you're talking about. I don't seem to remember this story.
It was in Michigan. It was like 5,000 below, or 5 or 10,000 below what we paid for it.
Oh, okay. One of the newer ones.
Yeah, one of the ones we were just doing the refi on.
Yes,
and we were pulling some money out of it. So we're like, okay, so then now the bank is going to give us like 70% loan to value. Mm-hmm. So of course we have our cash in the game. Our own money is in this property to a larger degree than what it should have been. But you have to be okay with that. And I'm okay with it because the cash flow is great and I'm going to hold it for the rest of my life. So as an entrepreneur, it's a long-term play that you have to think about. Long-term. An appraiser is living for today. Okay. Actually, I would argue the appraiser is living for 4 months ago and not even looking at accurate comps of what is actually sold and rehabbed. So you as an entrepreneur are going into business. You're buying something for the long term, and you have to be okay with that when you play this game. Right.
Now, an appraiser is not to be confused with an inspector. These are two different, I wish that, by industry standards, they were the same thing because you have to pay for both of these services a lot of times when you secure a loan. But that's a different thing beyond the scope of this this program, so we'll get to that in another day.
Yeah. So inspectors, totally different than appraisers. Some
Right.
people use those terms interchangeably. No, don't do that.
You need both, yeah, if you're working with a lender.
All right, so I want to hear your appraiser stories. You can leave a comment in the thread below. If you're watching the video version of this, please leave a comment. Tell us your stories and how you've dealt with it. Do you care? And has it kept you from becoming a real estate investor? Please don't let it keep you from becoming a real estate investor. Now go out there, take action, and become a real estate investor, because I believe it's the #1 way to build wealth, even if you get a bad appraisal. We'll see you next time.